Hey there, I'm Sarah Zarella, a portrait and wedding photographer and your host for Wedding Secrets Unveiled. This is a podcast where we cut through the complexity of wedding planning, leaving you with everything you need to know directly from the industry experts. If you want to simplify your wedding planning while having fun, of course, you came to the right place. Join me while I guide you through your planning, starting from your engagement to your big day when you say, I do. After photographing for over 20 years, I am sharing with you tips and tricks to cut through the excess noise. Because I believe from the moment you said yes, your planning experience should be a magical time in your life. Here you'll find episodes that are fun, stress-free, and straight to the point with a fresh, honest take on the reality of what you really need to know about planning your perfect day. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. So I have a question for you. Have you thought about having a wedding planner at your wedding? Have you hired a wedding planner at your wedding? Or are you on the fence of it? Do you even know the pros and the cons, or even what a wedding planner does? If any of these questions you're looking for answers, today is the podcast for you. I am speaking with Ariana, who is the owner and lead event specialist for AMC Weddings. Today's episode, we are going to break down what exactly a wedding planner does, how you can hire a wedding planner, the difference with packages. Oh, and we're also going to stick in some 2024 trends for you. So, if you're thinking about hiring a wedding planner, today's podcast is for you. But before we get into the podcast, I have a huge favor to ask you all. If you are enjoying this podcast, a great way to show your support is to leave a review. It's pretty easy. In fact, I'm going to read a recent review, a super helpful and entertaining podcast that helps with wedding planning and discusses a diverse variety of perspectives. This is just one review that I recently got. Personally, it means so much to me to hear your thoughts. Dan and I work really hard to deliver these episodes to you, so leaving us a review is just a great way to say thank you. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy my episode with Ariana. Well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. I'm your host, Sarah Zarella, and I'm super excited to have you here, Ariana.
I'm so excited.
Well, let's just get right into it, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Let's tell our listeners who you are, who you serve, and what you do in your business.
My name is Ariana. I'm the owner and lead event specialist of AMC Weddings. I have had my business now for 6 years, and I do full planning and design as well as event management for couples getting married. So I serve all of New England. However, I do specialize in Newport, Rhode Island, which is my favorite place to be. When I was little, I absolutely loved weddings. I was always begging my parents to attend weddings with them. Of course, there were no kids allowed at any of these weddings, but it was just like a fascination of mine. And throughout high school, I never thought that this was a real job. Turns out it is a real career that you can have. So when I was in college, I started working for other vendors in the industry. I absolutely fell in love with the entire wedding industry. And then when I graduated college, I launched my own business.
And then here you are.
Here I am.
6 years later and rocking it.
It's crazy. And I can't believe sometimes that I was only 23 when I started my business. I feel like me looking back at like a 23-year-old, that's a baby, but I was ready for it and I've stuck through it. I absolutely love it and I wouldn't be doing anything else but this.
I know. It's funny. I've been in the industry for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And I was a baby when I
started.
Right?
You feel like looking back, it's like, oh my God, how did anybody allow that to happen? You were so young.
Yeah, but also at the same time, it's just sometimes people are made for it because even though I look back and I was a baby, I knew what it was. You just have it. Sometimes you just got it.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Uh-huh. And sometimes being younger when you start something like that is almost better because you have the energy, you have the drive. If it fails, like, I don't know, it's really no big deal if that happens, but thankfully it did not for me and for you as well. But yeah, I love it.
Well, for today, though, for our listeners, we're going to kind of dive into what you do, which is wedding planning.
Yeah, perfect.
So tell us, why do you feel that couples even need a wedding planner? Because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners right now that are listening, and some of them may have not hired, some of them have, but they might be on the fence or might not even understand what a wedding planner is.
Yeah. So first of all, most couples getting married have never planned a wedding before. So that is the first thing to take into consideration is like you've never done this before, so maybe you don't know where to start, what to do, and maybe even if you do know where to start, you don't know all of the little details along the way. So having somebody there for you to guide you through that whole process, do things for you and on your behalf is just like the best way to do it. And then this way on your wedding day, you can really enjoy the wedding day and be a guest at your own wedding, and your parents can be guests and your family and friends, like everybody can enjoy the day while your planner is working for you, on your side, advocating for you and running those timelines, managing all of those vendors and doing all of that stuff so nobody has to come to you on wedding day.
What is, though, I'm just kind of getting ahead of what some people might be thinking, listening. An event, some people might think, well, I have an event coordinator at my venue.
Yeah, this is a big one. There's a huge difference. Although myself and wedding coordinators at venues work hand in hand, there's a big difference between our jobs. And I always say the biggest difference is the venue coordinator is there specifically for the venue or the caterer if they offer in-house catering. We are there for you, for the rest of your vendors. I mean, your venue coordinator is not going to be there at 6 a.m. when your hair and makeup artist arrive or when your photographer arrives, and your transportation, like they're just not a part of any of that. And not to say that, you know, they might have some good recommendations for you for people to use, but they're not going to help you plan those details before you get to the venue. And then the other thing is your venue coordinator typically leaves after dinner. And to me, like that's when their workday ends, and that's, you know, totally fine. That's what they're contracted to do. But a wedding is not over once dinner is over. You know, you still have all of open dance floor. You still maybe have some formalities. So just having somebody there throughout that entire time is like the best thing for you.
Also, too, I would think that there's a lot of people thinking, okay, fine, I understand what you do. I understand the difference.
Right.
But it's that big dollar sign that they're probably thinking about.
Yeah, it's definitely a luxury, but it's a luxury that is sometimes a necessity. And even though we are a bigger dollar sign of your planning process, we can help you save money along the way and just save a lot of stress and, you know, letting you know what you need, what you don't need. If you want something specific, maybe we know the perfect vendors to go to, and it just saves you the entire process.
And there is that saying out there that, like, time is money.
Correct.
Right? So, like, what is your time best served at? Doing your own job and worrying about your own job? Because if that's the case, then having someone like yourself do the other components allows you to go make money to pay for you.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Wedding planning is a full-time job. I mean, that's what I do full-time. So if you, as the client, are doing your wedding yourself, you know, that's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do, but you're taking on another full-time job. So you're, like you said, you're not saving any money that way.
No, and like I always say to the wedding planners, you know, there's always two types of people, right, that hire a wedding planner. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right here. There's the type A that like just wants every check mark, dot. They're just very organized and they want someone to help them and assist them. And then there's like the one that's just totally scattered.
Yes.
It's like two sides of the spectrum.
And I get both. My clients are pretty much half and half. So half of them are that type A. They really do want to be involved. They know exactly what they want. They know exactly how they want it done, and that's great. But then I do have that other half of my clients that they don't know what they want. And even when you present them with what they think they want, they're all over the place. And that's okay, but we are here to help you kind of reel it in. We're here to help you, you know, figure out what you want and all of that good stuff.
And do you have, like, different types of packages that you offer? I guess what I'm thinking about is for someone who's listening and they haven't ventured down hiring a wedding planner, can you just kind of, I mean, I guess you can only speak from your own business, but can you educate them a little bit about hiring a wedding planner and what they're looking at cost or budget?
Absolutely, yeah. I offer two standard packages. Package one is the full planning and design, which is, you know, from the moment you get engaged, you reach out to me, I do your venue search with you, we hire all of your vendors, we do your budget, your design plan. I'm really involved in every single aspect of your wedding planning process and then executing your wedding, etc. And then my other package is event management, and that is for the client that maybe they thought that they could do wedding planning all by themselves and they've done a great job so far, but they'll typically reach out to me about 6 months before the wedding. And though they have done a great job planning their entire wedding thus far, now they are struggling with the final pieces, putting everything together, doing those timelines with the vendors. So they really just want somebody to kind of take over at that point. So the event management package is when they have done kind of all of the work up until those last steps, and then I will tie up the loose ends of that job and execute their wedding day as well.
How about people who have planned their wedding?
Mm-hmm.
They're at the home stretch here.
Yep.
And they're just kind of realizing that everything's planned, timeline's done, but they just need a little bit of execution the day of. Do you do day of or no?
I don't. So that is more what I consider my event management package. I used to offer a day of service. However, I don't feel like there's enough quality in that. I just feel like it's almost like showing up to a party where you don't really know anything and you're trying to take over, but maybe you don't know all of the vendors or et cetera. There's always just some loose ends when you do it that way, in my opinion. So I do prefer doing the event management package where you have a little more, your hands are in it a little bit more, but you're still providing that day of service that they're looking for.
Right. So really the takeaway is if someone's thinking about having you join or a wedding planner join, it's better to do it sooner than later.
Correct. Yes. Especially I get so many messages on Instagram a lot of people that will reach out to me and, they don't hire me for whatever reason. And then they will reach out to me after their wedding and say, I wish we hired you. This went wrong on my wedding day, or just they wish that they did it. So definitely hire those who you are interested in well before your wedding to make sure that they're available.
I know. And I'm going to chime in here. It's almost like an insurance package. Yeah. Listen, like you said, there's two packages. There's one where you're there and you're planning and you're helping them from day one.
Yep.
You get that.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's that other person that's probably listening that's just thinking like, do I not?
Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's a luxury. Not everybody has the opportunity to have someone alongside helping them plan, but you got to outweigh the pros and the cons.
Right.
You got to figure out where your money's best spent and your time too. Right. But I have seen it where somebody hires somebody, and I'm not saying everybody who's just day of,
mm-hmm.
like you said, in your feeling, you get half the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
But there's some people who maybe just specialize in day of.
Right.
And they've executed that appropriately for them.
Correct.
But I have seen people where they might ask like a friend, or they might hire, like we talked about in the very beginning,
mm-hmm.
Ariana, 23.
Yes.
and they're just not as experienced. It's okay for a certain type of wedding, but there's certain caliber of weddings that are happening that you just need. I hate to say it, but just someone who it was worth the experience,
right?
And sometimes people just get in the way.
Yeah,
they defeat the whole reason why they're there.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned having a friend do it, or maybe a bridesmaid or someone like that. I've come across more stories than not of brides telling me, oh, I had, my friend used to do wedding planning, or they used to do something along the lines of what we do, and they're just going to help me. And then when wedding day comes, that friend is really not that helpful, and they're truly not that knowledgeable leading up to your wedding of what should be done professionally.
You mentioned that you are always getting messages or Instagram messages. I think that's just the name of the game. Everybody's funding is allocated differently, and everybody's important, key vendors is different. But I also get the same thing. Like mm-hmm. someone might hire a photographer and not hire us, and then they regret, maybe someone was less expensive, or
yeah.
And unfortunately, it's not like you get a redo.
Right. Exactly.
It's a one day.
Yeah.
So, if you're listening and you're starting to feel maybe a little overwhelmed or a little question, it's just probably best just to reach out, and maybe you can explain to people if they're right or not right. They might find out that that's not right for them, and right. Then they can move on.
Yeah, and I think that's another important piece of what I do for my full planning and design clients. Kind of goes along with you saying, maybe they hired somebody for whatever other reason, and then they always come back to you saying, I wish I went with you. Something that we can help you avoid is hiring, we're going to help you hire the right vendors. So whether they have personalities that match yours, budgets that match with yours, we take into consideration everything about that vendor to make sure that they are the right person for you, so you don't have any regrets after your wedding.
actually, speaking about vendors, what vendors do you feel that if you hired an event planner should really get in the mix and help? Like, what do you feel is the most beneficial for you as an event planner and wedding planner to help your clients when they're looking for vendors?
Yeah, so the vendors that I would love to help you hire would be any of those vendors that are going to be present at your wedding. So whether that be your photographer, videographer, band, DJ, caterer, any of those big vendors that really play a huge part in your wedding planning process and on your wedding day.
Like your on-site
Exactly,
vendors.
yes.
Like physically, I mean, yes, everybody has to come on site.
Correct, but people that you are going to see. Yeah,
Yes.
people that the couple is going to see and communicate with and just be around. Those are the important vendors for a wedding planner to hire for you, because we know who works well together, who's going to work well with you after we get to know you a little bit. And it makes the day seamless. And, you know, you would hate to hire somebody just because maybe they have the lowest price on the market and you think that their work is good, and that might be great. However, when you spend all day with them, you might not like them that much. And that's okay, but it's not okay when it's your wedding.
Right. And also, too, there's vendors that can service you and you don't have to jive perfectly with their personality.
Correct.
Because they're not the ones that are there with
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the ones that are not there on wedding day, you know, you don't have to be best friends with. But the ones that are there on wedding day, you want to love them because we are around you the most. We're around you more than some of your guests are around you.
So how do you know if a vendor is a good match for you?
Yeah, so I always take into consideration, I get to know my clients a little bit at the beginning stages of our planning process. And then I always take into consideration, first of all, their budget, second, their style, and then I take into consideration their personality. Also take into consideration who else we're working with for this wedding. So maybe I know that, you know, one vendor doesn't get along with another, or they just don't work well together. They don't mesh well when they're on site together. So we take all of that into consideration to make sure that we have a smooth wedding day as well as you have a seamless wedding day.
So what we're going to do, right, is we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back. We've kind of gone over why couples need to hire a wedding planner or not, and like vendors, but I want to rack your brain on what you're seeing trending for 2024. And also, too, let's talk a little bit about some first steps of, okay, fine, I want to hire a wedding planner. What do I do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I want to encourage you to check out our Instagram page. Today, we're doing a giveaway for all the listeners who have tuned in. So if you're feeling lucky and you want to win our giveaway, check out Sarah Zarella on Instagram. We definitely encourage you to write us a review. Check out our podcast on our website for our show notes, along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast so you'll never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate if you left a fabulous review for this show on Apple Podcast. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening. Well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. All right, Ariana, so before the break, we talked a little bit about like why a couple should even have a wedding planner and what type of different packages wedding planners can offer. But I really want to rack your brain about trends. So what are you seeing in 2024?
Yeah, so I am seeing a lot of color. I know in the past we have seen a lot of blushes, whites, neutral tones, which is really beautiful. But this year, we're in for the color. We are bolder colors, you know, just a lot of fun and really bringing a couple's personality into everything that involves your wedding, not just white. A lot of color.
How much do you think the Pantone color influences weddings? Do you think that people pay attention to that or not? Or is it more us in the design world that do?
I think it's us. I don't think anybody else is really paying attention to that, truly. But yeah, I think it's us. I see it a lot on like other wedding vendors' pages and between us like designers and everything like that. But yeah, I don't know if other people.
If your couples are paying attention to it.
Yeah.
I wonder if
Nobody has ever mentioned it to me.
Really?
Client-wise, no.
I'm just curious.
Never.
Because I know in behind the scenes in the design world, it drives a lot of things.
Yes.
So it must be that the design world, home decor, drives it, and then people see it.
Yes.
And they may not know it's the Pantone color.
Exactly.
Because I'll tell you why I say that. Are you seeing any plums this year? A lot of plums, purples, or no?
No.
No. Okay. Pantone color last year was a plums, purple.
Yes.
This year's peach.
Okay.
So I'm just curious that trends come a year later.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
But you're right. I am seeing a ton of color. Even editing wise, that dark, desaturated look is
that's moving out.
moving out.
Yeah.
People want to have their color, true color.
Absolutely.
And
you want to remember the day as it was and a little more vibrant than it was. But yeah, I'm loving all the color that we're seeing this year. A lot of fun stuff.
What else are you seeing?
I am seeing a lot of florals, really big floral installations, and really using the venue as much as you can for like photo ops. So really dressing up, anything at the venue that you find appropriate. Maybe the venue has a fountain that you really want to like have florals spilling out of, which could be really, really beautiful. And that is your photo op rather than like the greenery wall.
Well, you're talking the random installation that's stuck there, right?
Yes, exactly. It's always just placed somewhere and
Random.
It is, you're looking at a white wall and then there's just a slab of green on it. And sometimes it's okay if that's what you're loving, but that's not what I'm loving. So I'd really like to just see more of what is at your venue dressed up and utilized, because you did pick that venue for a specific reason, because you loved it. You love the scenery. You love the structure.
Well, I could say that I think a lot of the floral installations, if people are wondering, like, what are you talking about? If you haven't, because it's trending. We see it first, right?
Yes.
Watch The Bachelor.
Yes.
They always have the floral installations.
They do. They do. They really dress that up.
It's mostly florals.
Yeah.
And it's chairs.
Yeah.
Chairs, I find, there are so many options now for chairs that if you have in your budget to switch out your chairs, talk to a rental company. They're just doing that.
It elevates your space so much. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love chairs.
I do too. I love.
It's a weird statement to
I know.
say. I love chairs.
There's a girl that I know that's in the industry, and she specializes in chairs. And every time I see her, she always has these chair little dangling earrings. I'm like,
so cute.
It's interesting. Who would have ever bought chair earrings?
Yeah,
I'm like, you.
She did. Yes. Oh, how funny.
Right?
Yeah, but something so little really does elevate your space and just change the space from being the same as everybody else's.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I'm seeing is interactive.
Yes.
So anything that allows your guest to be part of. So what I mean by that is I'm seeing a lot of like champagne walls, or instead of just having the sign with the guest names for their seats, there's or the card table with the cards. It's actually displayed in an installation where someone can grab it.
Yeah. I love that also as an extra photo prop. So if you could picture like a great big wall with floral boxes on it, and there's floral spilling out of it, and people walk up as if they're going to pick a flower off of it, but it's their name instead. So they can do that. That's interactive. But then after, it's just so beautiful with the florals, you can take a photo in front of it.
Absolutely.
It's a 2 for 1.
2 for 1. We just did a wedding last summer at the Chandler, and she had this big floral installation at the entrance of her tent. So she juiced up.
Beautiful.
The
yeah,
cords.
It's my favorite thing to do to a tent.
But on either side of it, she had a cart, because her theme was garden, right? And so she had a cart that had flowers draping out of it and cascading down to the floor. But those were where all the little small name cards were for seating. So ultimately, those were all gone afterwards. However, now leaving a beautiful entrance with flowers and 2 carts, which throughout the entire night was just a pretty visual.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I definitely am seeing, like you said, more color, more floral displays, and interactive displays.
Yeah, I love that. I'm also seeing a lot of those finer details come to life. So let's take your invitations, for example. You're working with, a really great designer who's going to really capture your wedding day like in those first stages. So your guests are going to get it. It's going to be a really intricate design on your wedding invitation, and then that really opens their eyes to what your wedding is going to look like in a few months when they see it.
And nowadays, there's so many companies that can personalize.
Yes.
So much. Napkins, invites, place
Everything.
setting. So just a little personalization for,
Yeah.
and you don't have to do it in everything, especially if you have a tighter budget, can go a really long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I
So,
agree.
I see a lot of the trend going with place, like menus at your place setting with the person's name on it.
Yeah, I love that. And people love to see that. And something I've also seen that goes a long way, and this costs you absolutely nothing to do unless you're going to have it printed, but it could cost you nothing, is I have had a bride and groom in the past write a personalized thank you to each and every guest, and that was at their place setting when they went and sat at their table.
Well, that's what we did for our wedding.
I love that.
We found pictures.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be professional pictures. But
Right.
it could be just things off the phone. Some of them were pictures I grabbed when I was a kid because I may have had my childhood friend there. And I made them all black and white. So therefore, that's what made them unified. And on the back of it, we wrote handwritten notes. It took a long time, but I only had 95 people there. Including vendors, so probably only had like 85 friends. And, we did it. That's why it took some time, but we did it.
Yeah, and your guests love it. They feel like there's a purpose for them to be there. It's not just, oh, you're here at our wedding and we're not going to really pay any attention to you. It's, you came, we really appreciate you coming, and we did this specifically for you. And I think that goes a long way.
It's funny because I got married. This will be my 10th year anniversary come up in August, and I'm not saying I was a trendsetter. Maybe I was, but I'm not
Maybe
saying
you were.
Maybe I was. You know what it is when you – okay, so getting off subject for a second, but you know what it was is when I do this for a living, and I told myself that come my day, I want to be present. I want to forget about it all because I'm a super type A personality, let alone I'm in the industry. So, like, it's really – it's hard. And I also just really wanted to bring it back to the guests because they're coming to my wedding, and the vendors, right? So that's where I came up with, like, I just think we need to write a personal letter because I wasn't seeing it, and I just felt like that's the disconnect.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward, it's on trend right now.
Yes.
See that? Trend starter.
Exactly.
Trend starter.
Yeah, you made it happen 10 years ago.
All right. So, question for you. Totally going off subject now, but going back to wedding planning, right? Tell me, what are some steps that people should determine before they're even thinking about working with a wedding planner?
Yeah, so, you get engaged, you're excited to start the wedding planning process, and some people jump right in and just start hiring vendors and hire, your venue, and to be honest, that is the wrong thing to do. You need to take a breath, enjoy your engagement for, a week or so. And then the very first thing you need to do is determine your guest list. So whether that be just yours and your fiance's guest list, whether you have parents inviting people, whoever you have coming to your wedding, you need to determine exactly who is invited to that wedding. And that helps you because you don't want to fall in love with a venue that is maybe too small to host, your 300 guests that now you want to all of a sudden invite. So you don't want to get yourself in a pickle of that. You also don't want to hire a venue that is too large for the 50 guests that you want to invite.
And also, too, that's a really great, a piece of advice because a lot of people, like you said, they get married and they're like, oh, let's go find the location because that's what's sexy.
Right.
What's not sexy, sitting down and being like, who do you want to invite?
Right.
But at least you don't have to have it honed in, but that's a great point. An idea, because a lot of these venues are going to ask you the first question, how many people are you having?
Exactly. Yeah, so that is first and foremost, and that also goes in line with your budget, which brings me into my next point, is you need to set your wedding budget. That is the second thing that you need to do, or even the first thing that you need to do is set that budget because that plays a part in who you're inviting. So if you have a budget, that's maybe not that large, then maybe you can't have 300 guests. You need to tone that down a little bit to, 100 guests or whatever you may need. But setting a wedding budget is first and foremost, don't hire any vendors before you know what your wedding budget is.
And also, too, sometimes you can, and and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I've been around a long time, so I've seen it. But this is your expertise. But setting a budget's one thing, and you're going to have to delegate different areas for your budget.
Yes.
But you're going to start to get sticker shocked in some areas where you're like, whoa.
Yes.
I didn't realize that a photographer is X amount, or if I didn't realize a cake is X amount.
Yeah.
And then, but it's okay to shuffle because there's going to be other areas you're like, okay, I spent way more in the cake department than I wanted to. So I got to hone in a little bit on my flowers, or I got to hone in on a little bit maybe on, transportation. I don't know. I'm just saying, obviously there's a priority.
Correct.
But you got to have a little bit of an idea of what your overall budget is, because you're going to start to see where the pie is being sliced.
Exactly. And this is actually a huge thing that I do for my full planning and design clients is we talk about their wedding budget, and then the next thing we talk about is who is important to you. What vendors are important to you? Do you want a photographer? Do you want a photo and video package? Like, what is important to you as the client? And then we take that from there. So I might say, okay, well, they can spend X amount on a photographer, and now I know exactly who to go to for those services. And I, of course, know what vendors, what their prices are. So I know where to spend the appropriate amount of money.
Right, which is very helpful when they have someone like yourself by their side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which also, too, kind of goes back full circle of what we were talking about. This is where you can start saving people money, too.
Yes.
Because if you are a full-service planner, you can start looking at some contracts, figuring out where they can cut some things out.
Yeah.
Or you can actually start telling them, like, okay, this is what you're going to really realistically be spending on this.
Yep.
So then, therefore, you can't be looking at this for something else.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. It's also important, this is a little wedding tip for all of you that are engaged. When you do set your wedding budget, take $10,000 off of that. Take $10,000 off and put that to the side because you're going to have to tip your vendors. There might be fees that, pop up out of nowhere, or smaller vendors that maybe come up that you want to hire. So put that aside and save that because you will spend it, but...
Thank you. Okay, so chiming in here, right?
Yes.
I did an entire podcast episode. So if anybody's interested about gratuity and tips, we have a whole episode on that. It was a tough subject to cover, but it was a necessity.
Yes.
And I actually want to thank the person who wrote into me. I had a girl out in the Midwest who's been listening to this podcast. At the time she was getting married, I'm sure she's married because this was about a year and a half ago. I know. And she said, I just really want to know about gratuity.
Yes.
Because you search the internet and you see all these different things. If you are listening to this podcast, I am just going to tell you straight up, tip your vendors.
Yes, please.
Just tip them.
Yes.
So... And in somewhere along the way, it said, "Oh, if you're a business owner, you don't have to be tipped." No.
You are the one that should be tipped out of everybody.
Right.
You did all of the work. Are you kidding?
It's not like other service industries. In the wedding industry, most of the time, the business owner is the one that's servicing and providing
Correct.
you. And yes, I understand that people realize that, like, hair and makeup, that's an industry that when you go get your hair done or your nails done, you tip. So yes, those people are always tipped, but you cannot forget about your photo booth attendant.
Yeah, they're providing a service.
Right. Your photographer, your videographer, your main captain of your catering.
Yeah.
So and your wedding planner can help you with this. So those who have a wedding planner, you're at an advantage.
Yes. They are.
But those who don't, listen, I have a whole episode. I'm not trying to plug my episode, but like literally that's why I did it.
That's so helpful because every single one of my clients come to me about 2 to 3 weeks before their wedding when I tell them, hey, put your tips aside, put them in sealed, labeled envelopes, blah, blah, blah. And they always say, well, what do I tip my vendors? And then I will send them a guide that I created. But it's so helpful to have something out there that is...
Right. And also, too, big piece of advice, and that's actually so funny. That's what we talked about in the episode is just right off the bat, you got to put that aside. But that's with every service. So just so you know, wedding industry service, we are all tippable. So it's like the same thing. When you go to a restaurant, you're paying 20% on top of that, unless I guess your service sucks. But like even when your service sucks, I don't know, I'm still tipping 20%.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know.
Especially with the jobs that we do, I'm always like, you know what? Maybe you had a bad day. I've had bad days. It happens. I'm always tipping. I'm always tipping maybe a little too much.
But what it is that is how the industry is set up. They are not making the significant wage because they're expecting for the tips.
Correct.
Same thing with our industry. I'm just letting you know that Yes. Just good tip. Just if there's anything, just it is what it is.
I have had in the past some of my clients tip my assistants only, and that hurts. Like, you know, yes, they are there on wedding day and they're helping me so much with everything, but I did everything leading up to your wedding day, and I'm still there all day wedding day.
I know.
So it hurts.
I know. And like I said, it's a touchy subject,
Mm-hmm.
and it's why I created a podcast. But ultimately, all people are trying to do is get knowledge, right? They don't know. I understand that.
Right.
But it's so funny. You say the same thing. It happens a lot where they'll tip my assistants, and they won't tip me. And I get it. I understand why. It's hard not to take it personal because I am the one that's been there all day and I did all the planning and my assistant showed up the day of.
And then you're going to do all the work after.
But I get it because they're looking at me as the business owner and thinking, oh, you've already made the money on it. But they're not realizing there's so many other parts in Wheelhouse, and gratuity should never be expected. But if you're going to tip somebody out, then it should be the whole team. So what we do in my business is we've made a pact, Dan and I, that we just split it.
Yeah.
If he gets tipped and I get tipped, then we keep our tips.
Yeah.
Whatever he's given, whatever I'm giving. But if he gets tipped and not me, we split it. If I get tipped as a business owner and he doesn't, I give him a portion because he's been there right by my side. And that's why he's been by my side from day one and hopefully always, because we just treat it fairly. But it does – you know what else really bothers me since we're on this tangent? Whatever. We're being honest, right? We're breaking it down. It really bothers me when I see like the bands being tipped. And then where the photographers and the videographers are not tipped, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? I see the hair and makeup being tipped. I see the band tip. I'm like, do we just suck?
Yeah.
But I know we don't, because we get these beautiful reviews and these cards, and you know what? I Googled it. Somewhere on the knot, it has said that there's a menu. It's there. I don't. Granted, this was like 5 years ago, but I don't know if it's since left. But they say, like, they tell you all these different vendors to tip.
Yep.
And then they say use your discretion in your videographer and photographer. I'm like, what the heck?
Right. Oh, and I will say it pains me as the wedding planner. What I do with my clients is I take those tips from them earlier in the day or the day before, and I am the one to distribute them. And I always go through, and if I see like, oh my God, they're not tipping the photographer, that hurts me to now have to hand out all of those tips and not hand you one, because I know that, you know, you did a perfect job and you deserve one as well. And I don't like that.
And obviously, too, if there has been a situation where you just didn't jive with your planner,
right?
Yes, you do not need to expect to tip at that point. It's not like the wait staff thing where, you know, but yeah, there's just a lot of unique perspectives that people just don't know. Yeah. So hopefully we gave you a little bit of extra advice today.
And if you need help on tipping your vendors, let us know.
Yeah, and you know, and also too, you know, I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah. But with that said.
Yeah, that spills into my last point of the top 3 things that you should do before beginning your wedding planning process. So once you have set your budget, the next thing you need to do is figure out who is contributing to your budget, and if so, do they have a say in anything?
Ooh.
Yeah, touchy subject.
Yes. Family dynamics.
Yes, always touchy.
Okay.
But it's those conversations, those tough conversations have to happen before you have started wedding planning, because you do not want to take X amount of money from your parents or your future in-laws and expect that they don't get a say in anything. And then halfway through your wedding planning process, they say, well, I'm inviting everybody from work because I am paying. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be in those situations. So you need to determine it well in advance.
And that goes back down to a conversation that should be happening with your guest count, which is your number one thing.
Correct.
Yeah. You know, a lot of times, at least with photography, right? So if somebody's contributing significantly to your wedding, A, you're really lucky, first off.
Absolutely.
Because it's not a common thing anymore. But B, I always tell people, like, maybe get them a companion album or a parent album as a thank you.
Yes.
Present it to them later on as a thank you for helping. But, you know, again, kind of going back to the tip thing, if someone is significantly contributing, those people may have a say-so. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're contributing and it's just no strings attached, which is awesome. But, you know, you're going to have to find a way to also thank them.
Yeah,
a little gift.
absolutely.
Something.
I agree.
Doesn't have to be crazy.
Yeah, no. And I mean, maybe you're okay with them having a say in stuff, but there's nothing worse to me as your planner when we're all sitting in a rental meeting and, you know, mom doesn't like the plates you picked out. And now there's an argument and I'm sitting in the middle and it's awkward. It's awkward for everybody there. And it's just stuff that you need to determine well in advance. What's the freedom here?
Those are really good tips.
Thank you.
All right, Ariana, it is that time for our wrap-up question. So what are some key points that couples should be asking wedding planners to make sure that they are working with a professional company and to ensure that their wedding day is an absolutely perfect event?
Yeah, so the first thing that you should ask your wedding planner to make sure that they are equipped for working your wedding is how much experience they have. Obviously, everybody has to start from somewhere, but you may have, you know, a really intricate wedding and that requires a lot more time, a lot more details, a lot more knowledge, and you're going to want somebody who has years of experience under their belt for that.
Yeah, and also too, sometimes, you might just need a day of coordination, and that could be another type of wedding planner, right?
Absolutely.
So like you said, like there's different experiences levels for different weddings. You just have to figure out what's right for you. So asking the question, what type of experience, you'll know if they're right match for you or not.
Right. Absolutely. And the second thing would be look at their reviews and who has worked with them. So maybe you know them word of mouth. I've actually had a few weddings where the maid of honor of one wedding will now get married or the cousin or something, and then I end up working with them as well. So word of mouth is huge. Reviews are huge for us.
That's a really great point because especially when it comes to wedding planners, it's a one-shot deal. So you talk about how you get a ton of DMs in your message box saying, I wish I went with you. And, if you don't know, it's so hard. So just honestly, this good starting place is your venue.
Yeah.
Because your wedding planner is planning at your venue, which kind of comes back to your first thing, which is experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if your wedding planner has worked at that venue, once, twice, a million times, chances are they're good to go there.
And what's your third one?
My third and final one is ask your wedding planner how many weddings that they're servicing. So are they doing 3 weddings in a weekend, which to me is like a no-go. I personally am doing 1 wedding per weekend. You have your rehearsal the day before. Maybe you have a rehearsal dinner. You want to hire them for a post-wedding brunch. So making sure that they are available for you on your whole wedding weekend is important if that's what you're looking for.
What a great point. Because there's so many different venues in the industry that can do different caliber of weddings. Like, for example, a florist or a cake decor I've seen can do multiple weddings.
Oh, yeah. Easily.
A photographer, I can do 1 wedding a day.
Yes.
I can do multiple a weekend, though.
Yeah.
But like you said, a wedding planner,
yeah,
a true
we really
professional.
are we are there not only for the day, we're there for the weekend. I mean, I am the day before a wedding. My clients are texting me, calling me, they need your attention, and your attention cannot be somewhere else when they are needing you the day before their wedding.
You're right.
Yeah.
And because like a DJ, a DJ can do 1 wedding a day,
Yeah.
but multiple a weekend.
Correct.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled. You helped our listeners become one step closer to a journey of a stress-free wedding planning. Can you tell everybody where they could find you?
So you can find me on my website, amcweddings.com, on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest.
Everywhere,
yeah. Any social media you can find me on.
And also, too, for our listeners, I will have Ariana's information on our episode show notes, which you can find on our blog and our website podcast page, which is sarahzarella.com/podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
I love talking with you. Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I encourage you to check out our website at sarahzarella.com. We love photographing while having fun, of course. Check out our podcast page on our website for our show notes along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. I would so appreciate if you left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support and let us know what you think. If you know any wedding experts that would like to be a guest, we have a link directly on our website where they can let us know. Thank you for listening.